Ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening and welcome to the latest in our series of Doha debates, coming to you from the Gulf state of Qatar and sponsored by the Qatar Foundation. An independent report into the shocking violence earlier this year between opposition demonstrators and security forces in Bahrain was published last month, and it makes chilling reading. Prisoners were hooded, whipped, beaten and subjected to electric shocks. At least 5 died during the torture. Female prisoners were threatened with rape. Hundreds arrested, thousands sacked from their jobs, although most have been reinstated. One newspaper editor in the kingdom said people have seen hell. We've seen people killed, we've seen curfews, we know that people could be shot dead or disappear at a checkpoint. Society is crippled. The king said he too was shocked by the report, but accepted it, promising that laws would be changed and the guilty held to account. There would be compensation for victims, he said. Guilty verdicts on opposition members would be re-examined. But how credible are those promises? That's the question we ask you to address tonight. Our motion is, as always, controversial. This House has no confidence in Bahrain's promise to reform, and our speakers differ fundamentally on the issue. Speaking for the motion, Nabeel Rajab. He's president of the Bahrain Center for Human Rights. He's also Deputy Secretary General of the International Federation for Human Rights, and this year won a Democracy Award from the Woodrow Wilson Center in the US. And with him, Christopher Davidson, reader in Middle East politics at the University of Durham in the UK. He's the author of a number of books on the region. His next one is called After the Sheikhs, The Coming Collapse of Gulf Monarchy. I should point out there's a question mark in that title. Against the motion, Khaled Almaeena, editor-at-large of Arab News, the first English-language newspaper in Saudi Arabia. He travels and speaks widely and is a regular contributor to regional and international publications. And Abdulla Alderazi, he's a lecturer at the University of Bahrain College of Arts and a member of the Bahrain Human Rights Society. He was recently appointed to the government commission tasked with responding to last month's report into the violence. Ladies and gentlemen, that's our panel. So now let me ask Nabeel Rajab to speak for the motion, please.
Thanks, everybody, and I'm happy to be here. As you all know, that my country witnessed an uprising in last February as we were inspired by the Arab Revolution and Arab Spring. Unfortunately, this uprising were met with a violent crackdown where at least 50 people were killed. Thousands of people were detained, systematically tortured, electrocuted, hanged, beaten, sexually harassed and raped. Thousands of people were fired from their work, from their school, from their university. We were fighting for the same demand that we were fighting for the past 80 years, 20s, 40s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s. Social justice, democracy, freedom. The same demand that we were always promised by the regime, that they will reform themselves, that things are going to be better. But always those promises were not met by the regime. Again, the same king who is talking today about the report, he's the same king who has in 2001 signed and talked in the newspaper saying that we're going to have a proper reform, we're going to have a parliament that has all power to legislate, we're going to have the same constitution that we had in the 70s. The king did not keep his promise. The same prime minister who has been there for the past 42 years, who is responsible for human rights violation, corruption, tenths of people were killed during his time. I myself don't think the same prime minister who is part of the problem or who is all the problem in Bahrain could in any way be part of the solution. I don't think that government capable or able to carry any kind of reform process. Thank you.
Okay, Nabeel Rajab, thank you very much indeed. This is the king who ordered an independent report into what had taken place, which came up with massive, serious violations. He accepted it. He went public with it. He's had to endure the shame that went with that. And you don't think he's serious about this? Nobody's ever done this before. No government has ever done this before. Why
that
not?
Was smart of him to distance himself from responsibility and distance the member of his family, as they were responsible for most of the violation, including
why does it distance from him? He's accepted the report.
Because the United Nations is supposed to send a team of investigation. To prevent that team, he created his own commission. And you don't expect...
And what was wrong with the commission?
You don't expect to see the report of the commission will accuse the king who formed the commission.
What was wrong with the commission?
There are
the commission had highly respected people
about
on
crimes,
the commission.
Did not talk about criminals.
It may not have used that word, but it came up with a lot of activities that violated international law, and it said so repeatedly,
I totally disagree. There are a lot of things positive in the report. But yes, it is not a reform process. The report talks about a human rights violation in February, March, and April. So this cannot be in any way a reform process, number one. Number two, there was supposed to be a human rights team coming to investigate in Bahrain. And with the request of my government, they stopped that team.
Nabeel Rajab, it uncovered serious systemic failures. It didn't just talk about the violence, it talked about the courts, it talked about the press, it talked about the way laws were used and abused, according to the commission. You don't think the king is serious after doing that? How could he possibly go back on his word, having gone so public?
You can't just talk about evaluate things from words or articles. You evaluate things from implementation, from practice.
Okay, so all cases related to death and torture have been referred to the prosecutor.
3 or 4 weeks, the report is out. The things is the same thing in the ground. Those people who are responsible for the crimes committed against humanity, they were awarded, they were upgraded, they were given a better job. Okay. The guy heading the security apparatus, today he's hitting a higher position.
Okay.
The violence in the street is the same going on. Yesterday, a child of 5 days old died because of the violence.
You made the point. Nabeel Rajab, thank you very much indeed. Now could I ask, please, Khaled Almaeena to speak against the motion, please.
Well, I think while we all agree that what happened in Bahrain was extremely sad and unfortunate and bloody, and it should never have happened, the reason I think there will be reforms is because the focus of the world is now on the Arab world. Forget the Arab Spring on the side, but also the focus on the GCC countries. At the same time, there's a new group of people in the GCC. No more is a one-way communication. There's a young group, 50% of the GCC population is under 35. They would really like to see and play a bigger role. Now, why I think reforms are there in the offing is because no longer can the leaders of the GCC or the authorities or those people in power or the police can afford to ignore these people. Reform is a process, not a remedy, and it's not an analgesic or you're giving an aspirin. It's a continuing process. And what happened in Bahrain was an eye-opener for other countries in the region, that you have to take people, their aspirations, no more. And they would always say a few years when I was growing up, a shuyukh abkhas. And now if you tell that to a young guy, he said, go to hell. We are abkhas, we know more. Abkhas means we know. So I really think young people will not take the nonsense they took before. At the same time, I think we have to give the Bahraini government some credibility. They have released prisoners. Yesterday I read that 70 or 80 of the players have been released. But I really think these are cosmetic things, and it should be enforced and enlarged so that all those people arrested and jailed should be released under a direct amnesty from the king. Once that is done, then I think the reform process would go ahead. But I really believe, and this is a gut feeling and many others, that nobody in the Gulf can afford to have repression or suppress people as was being done before in the Arab world.
Khaled Almaeena, thank you very much indeed. You talk about new people in the GCC. There aren't new people in power in Bahrain. These are the same people who've allowed this culture of impunity that the report talks about, and previous cases of torture which were highlighted by the UN as far back as 2003, as far back as the 90s. How come you have faith in these people? These are the same people who've kept this system going.
But I have faith in the young people, the people who are now using Twitter and using the Facebook and are taking no for an answer. They would really like to play a bigger role. Now, if anything happens...
But they can't play a bigger role when these people are still in power and torturing them, can they?
They cannot, but I think there are many ways to get the world attention to highlight what happens. And I really believe it's a two-way street. I do agree that both sides have to give in. It's not, reforms are not an emotional blackmail on the part of people, nor a threat. I think that those in power should go ahead. But there
look at the signs. I mean, what Nabeel Rajab was talking about, the security minister, for instance. I mean, he's now been made, what is it, Secretary General of the Supreme Defense Council. He's now a security